We're going to start off our pre-algebra year talking about the order of operations. The target for this lesson is that you will be able to use the order of operations to evaluate algebraic expressions. You will need to take your own notes, so before we get started, grab some paper and a pen or pencil and write it as we go along. Mathematicians have established an order of operations to evaluate expressions involving more than one operation. For example, one expression could have addition, multiplication, and exponents all in the same problem, and we all need to follow the same order so we all arrive at the same correct answer. We use an acronym called GEMS to help us remember the order. So, to evaluate problems with more than one operation, follow these 4 steps. So in GEMS, the G stands for grouping symbols. Now, in middle school, you are probably caught an acronym called PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, where the P stood for parentheses. Parentheses are an example of grouping symbols. However, you're in high school now, and there's other forms of grouping symbols that you should be aware of. For example, you will also see brackets. You could see absolute value bars. You can see square roots, or you can see fractions. All of the above are considered grouping symbols and should be taken care of first. The E stands for exponents. Just like before, something like 5 to the second power is an exponent. The M stands for either multiply or divide. And this step comes with a little caveat that I'm going to write off to the side. You always need to go in order from left to right. So it doesn't matter if you do multiplication or division first. It's whatever you see first. It's on the left-hand side as you work your way over to the right-hand side. And we're going to talk about that in today's lesson. Finally, the last step stands for subtract or add. And that also comes with a little side note here. Must go in order from left to right. So that's the 4 steps. We use GEMS, and you're going to hear me reference GEMS multiple times throughout today's lesson. But that's what it stands for, and these are the steps that you will need to know. If you're still writing, pause this video. Otherwise, I'm going to clear my screen so I can move on to the first set of examples. All right, example 1, using the order of operations. We're going to evaluate each expression using the acronym GEMS. And I'm just going to rewrite it so I can reference it throughout these examples. So problem A, first thing I'm going to check for is any grouping symbols. There's no parentheses or brackets or anything like that in this problem. E stands for exponents. There are also no exponents inside this problem. M stands for multiply or divide. Start at the left-hand side and start working my way over. Don't see any multiplication or division. So finally, we arrive at the last step, S. S stands for subtract or add. So start at the left-hand side and work my way over. The first piece I see is this 24 minus 8. So I must do that first. 24 minus 8 gives me 16. Bring down the remainder of the problem. So the part that I did not do yet, the part that I did not underline, I'm going to drop down that plus 6. Now I keep looking for any addition or subtraction. I see addition here, so I need to do that next. 16 plus 6 gives me 22. 22 is my final answer. Let's do another one, problem B. Working my way through the steps. G stands for grouping symbols. There are no grouping symbols in this problem. E stands for exponents. There are also no exponents in this problem. M stands for multiply or divide in order from left to right. So starting at the left-hand side, when I work my way over, the first thing I see is division. So I'm going to take care of that first. 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. Drop down the remainder of the problem. Now I keep looking for any multiplication or division. The next thing I see is this multiplication. So I need to multiply 5 times 4, and that gives me 20. Problem C. G stands for grouping symbols. No grouping symbols here. E stands for exponents. There are also no exponents here. M stands for multiply or divide. So start from the left, work my way over. The first piece I see is this 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. Drop down the stuff I did not do yet, so that plus 16 and that minus 3. I'm going to start over and look for any multiplication or division, which I don't see either, so that step is done. Last step, S, is for subtract or add. First thing I see is 16 plus 2. That gives me 18. Drop down the minus 3. Well, now I could just finish it off. 18 minus 3 gives me a final answer of 15. Let's take a look at problem D. G for grouping symbols. There are no grouping symbols. E for exponents. There are also no exponents. M stands for multiply or divide. So starting from the left, the first thing I see right off the bat is this 4 times 20. That gives me 80. Now if I keep looking, the next piece I see is this 4 times 5. I'm going to drop the plus, and 4 times 5 gives me 40. I'm going to bring down that plus 4.8. No more multiplication or division left in this problem, so now I can go to the last step. And since I have all addition, I can just add straight across. So 80 plus 40 gives me 120. Bring down the plus 4.8. And when I'm adding these two together, remember, 120 really has an invisible 0.0 at the end. And 4.8, of course, already has a decimal. When you're adding with decimals, you must line up your decimal points. So now if I add straight down, I get 124.8. So my final answer is 124.8. I'm going to clear my screen, so if you need to pause, do so now, and move on to the next set of examples. I'm going to rewrite that acronym GEMS. Example A. Again, there are no grouping symbols, and there are also no exponents. So now I'm going to look for multiplication or division. The first thing I see is 6 times 3. 6 times 3 gives me 18. Drop down the remainder of the problem. The last thing I have is this 25 minus 18, and that just gives me a final answer of 7. Problem F, there are no grouping symbols. There are no exponents. M for multiply or divide, the first thing I see is 56 divided by 8. That gives me 7. Drop down the minus 4, and that's easy. 7 minus 4 just gives me 3. One more example, and we made this one a little more difficult. So G stands for grouping symbols, no grouping symbols. E stands for exponents, and this time I have an exponent, this 3 to the second power. Remember, when you have an exponent, the exponent tells you how many times to multiply the base by itself. So 3 to the second power does not mean 3 times 2. It means 3 times 3. 3 times 3 gives me 9. I'm going to drop down the remainder of the problem. Okay. Exponents are done. Now I'm going to look for multiplication or division from left to right. First piece is this 2 times 9. That gives me 18. Next piece I see is this 4 divided by 2. That gives me 2. And finally, I can add these two together. 18 plus 2 just gives me a final answer of 20. So we have now gone through 7 examples together. I'm going to clear my screen, and you're going to help me go through a few problems together. Here we go. You try problems. So again, I'm going to rewrite that acronym just so we can reference it. So take a look at problem number 1. What should I do first? Remember, division will always come before addition. Division is here, addition is here. So I must do the 6 divided by 2 first. 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. I'm going to bring down that plus 1. What's my final answer? The correct answer is 4. Okay, a slightly more difficult one. Problem 2. What should I do first? Multiplication comes before subtraction, and I always start at the left-hand side. So the first thing is to do 6 times 8, which gives me 48. Bring down the minus, 2 times 4. What should I do next? I should multiply 2 times 4 because I'm still working with multiplication. 2 times 4 gives me 8, and I'm going to bring down the minus and the 48. One more step. What's the final answer? The correct final answer is 40. How'd you do? So far, so good? Let's make them a little more difficult. Example 2, using grouping symbols. So now for these problems, I'm not going to be able to fly through that GEMS acronym so easily. I'm going to have grouping symbols to work with. So problem A, I have this big fraction bar here, and the fraction bar is a grouping symbol. The fraction bar just tells me I need to solve the top separately than I solve the bottom. And then at the very end, we can worry about the fraction. So on top, it's pretty easy. I only have the expression 7 times 4. That just gives me 28. However, the bottom is a little more complicated. So I have the plus, I have the exponent, and I have the minus. So if I work my way through GEMS, E stands for exponents, and I do have an exponent, so this must come first. Remember, 7 squared means 7 times 7, which is 49. I'm going to bring over that plus 8, that minus 1, and my big fraction bar. Okay, I'm still going to simplify the bottom. So now the exponent's taken care of, I'm going to look for any multiplication or division. If I start at the left and work my way over, I don't see any multiplication or division. So that step's done. Now I just need to look for subtraction or addition. So the first thing I see is this 8 plus 49, and that gives me 57. Bring over the minus 1, and bring over my numerator of 28. Still simplifying the bottom here, so I got one more step. 57 minus 1 just gives me 56. So yes, your final answer is a fraction, but that's okay, you're in high school now. So now we need to simplify this fraction. Anytime you have a fraction, your final answer must be in simplest form. You must reduce as far as you possibly can. So to reduce, try to think of what number I can divide both 28 and 56 by. There's a few different numbers you can choose from. Try to go with the biggest number you can. It'll just make your simplifying a little bit faster. So I know I can divide both of these numbers by 7. Now, if you weren't thinking 7, that's okay. You could have also divided by 2. You could have also divided by 4. But I chose 7 because 7 is the biggest number I could think of. So 28 divided by 7 gives me 4. And 56 divided by 7 gives me 8. Now I simplified, but it's still not in simplest form because 4/8 still reduces. I can divide both of these by 4, and I'll get a final answer of 1/2. 1/2 does not reduce any further, so that is my correct final answer. Let's take a look at 2 more examples. Problem B. G stands for grouping symbols, and I do have grouping symbols here. I have these parentheses. You must work inside the parentheses first, so I need to take care of this 14 minus 3. 14 minus 3 gives me 11. I'm going to bring down the parentheses. I'm going to bring down that 5. Grouping symbols are done. Now I'm going to look for exponents. I do not have any exponents. Now I'm going to look for any multiplication or division. And I do have multiplication here. Remember, when you have two numbers that are only separated by parentheses, it's implied that you're going to multiply those two numbers. So 5 times 11 just gives me 55. Okay, problem C. Again, I have a fraction. That's a grouping symbol. So that tells me I just need to simplify the top, and then I can simplify the bottom. So on top, I just have 27 minus 3. That's easy. That gives me 24. On the bottom, I have 4 plus 2. That's also easy. That gives me 6. So I do have a fraction, but now I need to simplify. The biggest number that goes into both 24 and 6 is 6, so I'm going to divide them both by 6. And when I do that, I just get 4 over 1, or of course you can rewrite it as a whole number, 4. If you're still writing, pause the video because I'm going to clear my screen. 2 more examples for you, and these ones are a little bit longer. So let's rewrite GEMS, and let's get to it. Problem D, looking for grouping symbols. This problem has 2 sets of grouping symbols. I have these brackets here, and I have these parentheses. You should always start with the grouping symbol that's closer together, the innermost set. So the parentheses are closer to each other than the brackets are. Therefore, I must start with these parentheses, 11 plus 8. 11 plus 8 gives me 19. Drop down everything else, including the brackets. So I took care of one grouping symbol. The parentheses are done. Now I need to worry about the brackets. So now inside the brackets, I have this 35 minus 19. I need to take care of that. That gives me 16. Drop down that times 4. Finish the problem. 16 times 4 just gives me 64. Let's do one more. Problem A. So starting on the left-hand side, I'm going to look for grouping symbols. I have 2 sets of grouping symbols. I have these brackets and I have the parentheses. Must take care of the parentheses first because they are closer together. So inside the parentheses, I have 2 operations. I have an exponent and I have division. I have to take care of the exponent first. So remember, 4 to the third means 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 gives me 16. 16 times 4 gives me 64. I'm going to drop down everything else. So the divided by 8 that's in the parentheses, then the minus 22 that was inside the brackets, and then the times 3. Okay, I still have grouping symbols. I still have 2 sets of grouping symbols. I still have those parentheses that we said we have to take care of first. So now I'm going to keep working inside those and do that division next. 64 divided by 8 just gives me 8. Drop down everything else. You can lose the parentheses, but the brackets are still there. Next thing we're going to take care of is the brackets. So 22 minus 8 just gives me 14. Drop down that times 3, and then 14 times 3 gives me 42. Still with me? I'm going to clear my screen, and then you're going to help me do 2 more problems. Here we go. You try problem number 3 and number 4. Going to rewrite GEMS. All right, take a look at problem 3. What should I do first? I have a grouping symbol, so I have to work inside of the grouping symbol first. Now, inside of the grouping symbol, I have subtraction and I have multiplication. Which one should I take care of first? I should take care of the multiplication. 2 times 2 gives me 4, and I'm going to drop down everything else, including the parentheses, and the divide by 6. What should I do next? I still have these grouping symbols here, so I need to do 10 minus 4 next. That gives me 6, and I can drop down the divide by 6. One step left. What's the final answer? The final answer is 1. All right, problem 4. What should I do first? G stands for grouping symbols. That always comes first. So 5 minus 1 just gives me 4. I'm going to drop down everything else. What's the second step? The exponent. 2 to the second power means 2 times 2. That just gives me 4. And I'm going to bring down everything else. What's the third step? I need to multiply. Remember, multiplication and division go together. It's whatever I see first. So the first thing I see is this 4 times 12. That gives me 48. What's the final answer? Final answer is 12. Okay, we got one more set of examples to go through, so let's get to it. Example 3, evaluating variable expressions. So the directions are a little bit different this time. It says to evaluate each expression when x is equal to 3 and when y is equal to 6. So notice all 3 of my problems has x's and y's in them. We're going to have to do some plugging in before we can evaluate. So problem A, I'm going to rewrite the problem. I'm going to put the 3, but I'm going to take out this x, and I'm going to replace it with its value of 3. So it's 3 times 3 squared plus 1, and now I can use gems to simplify. So grouping symbols. Yes, I have a parenthesis here, but inside the parenthesis I just have a 3. There's nothing inside those parentheses I can simplify, so I'm done. E stands for exponents, and I do have an exponent. 3 to the second power means 3 times 3, which is 9. I'm going to drop down everything else. M, multiply or divide. I have multiplication. 3 times 9 gives me 27. S stands for subtract or add. 27 plus 1 gives me 28. Let's do another one. Problem B. So before I can solve, I need to rewrite the problem and plug in some numbers. So I'm going to take out the x and plug in 3, plus I'm going to take out the y and plug in 6. Now let's follow with gems. G, grouping symbols. Yes, I have grouping symbols. 3 plus 6 gives me 9. Drop down the parentheses, 3. Grouping symbols are done. Even though there's still parentheses here, there's only a 9 inside, and the 9 is already simplified. E for exponents. I don't have any exponents. M for multiply or divide, and I do have multiplication. 3 times 9 gives me 27. Let's take a look at another one. So let's rewrite the problem. Take out the y, plug in 6, minus, take out the x, plug in 3. Don't forget my exponent. Okay, let's solve. G for grouping symbols. Yes, I have a grouping symbol. 6 minus 3 gives me 3. Bring down the exponent and bring down the 5. Grouping symbols are done. E stands for exponents, and I do have an exponent. 3 to the second power means 3 times 3, which is 9. I'm going to bring down that 5. Exponents are done. M for multiply or divide. I have this multiplication here. 5 times 9 just gives me 45. I have 2 more examples for you, so I'm going to clear my screen so we can take a look at them. Problem D. Now for these 2 examples, we changed the numbers up a little bit. So if I look at the directions, now I want you to plug in when x is equal to 4 and when y is equal to 5. So for problem D, I'm going to take out the y, I'm going to plug in 5, parenthesis, 19 minus, I'm going to take out the x and plug in 4, 4 squared. Inside my parentheses, I have subtraction and I have an exponent. So if I follow gems, I need to ask myself which one comes first. The subtraction is the last step, the exponent is the second step, so I have to take care of the exponent first. 4 to the second power means 4 times 4, which is 16. Drop down everything else. Inside those parentheses, I still have another operation, so I need to take care of the subtraction next. 19 minus 16 gives me 3. I'm going to drop down that times 5. 5 times 3 gives me 15. One more example, problem A. So on the top, instead of saying 6 times y, I'm going to say 6 times 5 all over. And on the bottom, instead of saying x plus 1, I'm going to say 4 plus 1. Now remember, fractions count as grouping symbols. So I'm going to start with the top and take care of that. 6 times 5 gives me 30. On the bottom, 4 plus 1 gives me 5. And then I'm going to simplify this fraction here. 30 over 5, I can divide both of those by 5. And I get 6 over 1, or just 6. How we doing so far, so good? All right, I'm going to clear my screen, and then we have 2 more U-Try problems for you to do with me. Here we go, problem 5. So for these 2 problems, we have different variables and different numbers, so please make sure you're paying attention to the directions when you solve. Problem 5, let's plug in. I'm going to rewrite the problem, 6 parenthesis. What should I plug in for x? 4 plus, what should I plug in for y? 5. Let's use GEMS. To evaluate, what should I do first? I have a grouping symbol, so I need to work inside the grouping symbol first. 4 plus 5 gives me 9. Bring down the parentheses and the 6. What's my final answer? 54. All right, problem 6. Brand new expression, brand new values to plug in. So instead of saying m squared, what should I plug in for m? 6 squared minus, what should I plug in for n? 2 squared. Okay, let's use GEMS to evaluate. What should I do first? I have 2 sets of exponents, but I'm going to start with the one on the left-hand side. So let's do 6 to the second power. 6 times 6 gives me 36 minus 2 to the second power. What should I do next? I still have another exponent. So 2 to the second power means 2 times 2. That just gives me 4. Bring down that minus 36. What's the final answer? 32. There we go. You just made it through your first set of notes.